An assembled Marvel universe comes together to mourn the passing of Kamala Khan, a young hero who was stolen from them all too soon. What'll happen next? Well, let's hop into the pages of Fallen Friend, The Death of Ms.Marvel issue number 1, a brand new special anthology issue, reuniting 3 of the most influential Ms.Marvel writers of all time. What'll happen next? Well, let's hop on in together and find out. So then, the first story in this 3-part collection is brought to us courtesy of Willow Wilson, Kamala Khan's original co-creator, the woman who helped launch the character, in what is now considered a modern landmark series that eventually saw Ms.Marvel adapted into video games, movies, and cartoons. I gotta imagine it was a bit of an awkward call for Wilson when she got asked to come back and work on this big funeral issue, especially considering this is her first time back at Marvel in a while. But still, I digress. As we join the story proper, we are at the Khan family's local mosque, where we're reintroduced to a ton of very important characters from those original Ms.Marvel stories. There's Abdullah, the local Amon, Bruno, the boy that Ms.Marvel loved, as well as her best friends Zoe and Nakia. Obviously, this is pretty goddamn awkward for them all right now, as they are some of the only people who actually knew about Kamala's double life as a superhero, and they still need to keep that secret from her non-powered friends and family as superheroes begin to pile on in to pay their respects. Now, if you're like me, you're probably thinking to yourself, wait, but didn't Kamala unmask after taking the killing hit for Mary Jane? Shouldn't more people know who she is? Well, they actually find a clever way around that. The Amon is actually doing a special Hatam service to honor not just the passing of Kamala, but all of the people who were killed, missing, or injured in Dr. Rabin's big attack from Amazing Spider-Man number 26. Again, this story is already putting way more thought and effort into the mechanics of all of this than the Spider-Man book that killed Ms.Marvel did. I gotta say too, this issue is actually really educational. As someone who's never actually attended a Muslim funeral before, I actually came away from this issue having learned a lot. Apparently the way it goes is that friends and family all take turns reading from the Quran, and as you know, Ms.Marvel and Kamala had a lot of friends from a lot of different walks of life. We see Naftali, her Jewish friend who she bonded over sandwiches with, and probably one of my favorite C-plots from the Wilson years, as well as heavy-hitting superheroes like Wolverine who actually sit down with Kamala's parents. Logan has of course lived a very interesting life and actually attends the funeral in traditional Muslim garb. Also, according to Kamala's parents, his salam is very good. Man, the things you pick up walking the streets of Madripoor, am I right? This is a sweet moment and fitting too, as Wolverine was actually the first superhero that Kamala had teamed up with in her own book. It's around this time too Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, ends up making the scene, covering her head in a show of respect to the mosque. Naturally, Kamala's friends flock to Carol and ask her if it's all going to be okay, and in traditional Carol fashion, she doesn't really sugarcoat it. She says that yes, things are going to be okay. Not soon, not by enough, but bit by bit, if they take care of each other, there'll come a day when things are okay again. Now, the second story in this collection is written by Mark Waid, and it pays homage to Kamala's time on the Champions team, which honestly, it's been so long I forgot Mark Waid was the one who originally launched that new version of the team. And honestly, for my money, the Jim Zub years on the Champions were better, but hey, I don't think we're ready to have that conversation yet. Miles, Nova, Amadeus, Viv, and the rest of the team all mourn their loss, because not only did they lose a close friend, but they lost a leader, the heart of their team, the person who gave them their mission statement, the one who believed that as young heroes they could be doing more. This is all especially hard on Viv Vision too, because she is of course a machine who struggles with regular human emotions. Her lack of feeling ends up getting under the skin of Braun, Amadeus, Cho, who were reminded that these two were actually in a short-lived relationship during Wade's Champions, a fact of which I don't think had actually been brought up since, so really when they're fighting about who's sadder at the funeral, that's what they're really fighting about. Viv, desperately wanting to feel what her teammates are feeling, ends up activating her emotion components, which, you know, end up working too well as she is now supercharged with sadness. And not just for the death of Ms.Marvel, but also for the death of her own mother and brother, who she never actually properly mourned herself, what with being a machine who can literally turn her emotions on and off. Amadeus continues to act like a prick and needles poor Viv, who ends up actively flying away, only to give one last eulogy to Kamala in an alley before eventually turning her emotions off one more time. Now, the third and final story in this collection is brought to us by Saladin Ahmed. He, of course, wrote the magnificent Ms.Marvel book, which wasn't nearly as critically or commercially acclaimed as the original Wilson run, but, you know, there were some good ideas in the series, and I certainly enjoyed a lot lot of it when it was going on. Weirdly though, this part of the story seems to try and honor Kamala's time as an Avenger, which in all fairness maybe really only lasted about 2 volumes before that book ended up getting rebooted, and Amid didn't even write any of that stuff. Wade arguably wrote more of her as an Avenger. The main POV character for this story is actually Tony Stark, Iron Man, who takes off his repulsor boots when he enters the mosque in another nice show of respect. Tony chats it up with Doctor Strange, who had actually been instrumental in trying to save the life of Kamala's father. After he had fallen ill in the pages of Magnificent Ms.Marvel, they broached the idea about maybe possibly using magic to resurrect a young hero who was stolen from them all too soon. But of course, this isn't their first rodeo, and they know that that's never the right answer. Magic, of course, always has a cost. And even if they did bring her back, it's not like she would be the same or anything. Oh boy, keep this in mind moving forward. Captain America makes a big appearance and plans to give a eulogy, though they make a point of showing that he doesn't actually take his boots off. Steve admits that he didn't actually know Kamala nearly as well as a bunch of the other people in this very room do, but from the short time that he spent with her, he knew that she was a young woman with gumption, with drive, someone who became a hero for all the right reasons because they believed that they could make true, lasting, positive change in the world around them. This nice speech actually ends up getting interrupted by one of the wrecking crew deciding now would be a great time to rob a free clinic. Obviously, interrupting a funeral service like this is in terrible taste, and when this guy sees all the angry superhero faces looking back at him, he decides to just turn himself in, instead of getting the ever-loving crap kicked out of him. Now, as the comic begins to come to a close, you're probably thinking, okay, we've seen Avengers, we've seen Champions. There's one pretty damn big glaring omission right now, and that is, well, Spider-Man himself, Peter Parker. No shock, Spider-Man ends up late to the funeral because he'll probably be late to his own funeral. As you might have guessed, the real internal struggle that Spider-Man is dealing with right now is how does he approach Kamala's grieving parents. After all, he barely knew her and now she's dead because of him. Does he say that they were friends? They weren't really. Does he say that she was his intern? That sure isn't very sympathetic. So instead, Peter decides to say that Kamala was his hero, which is nice in theory, but also kind of a giant-ass cop-out because that's where the comic comes to an end. Only not really, and I'm actually glad I waited till later in the week to cover this book because out of the blue, Marvel decided to release an epilogue to this story. It's a single page released free digitally wherein we see the last person to show up at Kamala's funeral is actually Cyclops. The rest of the champions lay into him because, well, he was a member of the team. Or at least his younger time-traveling self was. It's kinda complicated, but basically Miles is pissed at him for not showing up because, well, him and Kamala got along so good and she really respected him. Scott's response is about as cryptic as a sledgehammer to the face. He says that he can't really explain why he was late for the funeral, but one day everyone, including Spider-Man, will know. And that day turned out to be today when it was announced by Marvel that Kamala Khan will be getting resurrected as a mutant. And she'll be getting a brand new solo series co-written by the young woman who plays her in the movies. And yeah, that's basically where the story comes to a close. So that was Fallen Friend, The Death of Ms.Marvel issue number 1, everyone, and ultimately this story left me feeling quite conflicted. On one hand, killing Ms.Marvel in a Spider-Man story to help spur Peter Parker on is still gross and unnecessary and vaguely mean-spirited, but for what it's worth, I did think this issue, which was thankfully written by people who were actually important in getting Kamala over as this likable modern superstar character, was actually handled with a lot of grace and respect and love and passion, basically everything that was missing from the Spider-Man story that killed her. But then, somehow Marvel editorial still managed to harm this story by just a few days after its release, revealing, nah, actually, she's totally gonna come back. And you were right, we're totally bringing her back as a mutant as part of a bigger multimedia blitz between the shows, movies, and comics. It's like they very literally would not allow Ms.Marvel to rest in peace for long. Still though, for what it's worth, if you like older Ms.Marvel stories, if you have a love and appreciation for this character, then I think this one will certainly tug your heartstrings just a little bit. But I also totally can't blame you at all if you don't want to touch it or buy it for fear of feeling that you're supporting Marvel in their boneheaded decisions with the character. Overall though, for what it's worth, I would feel comfortable giving this one a 7 out of 10. It could have been much, much worse.
Hey there everyone, it's your pal Cape Jewel again, and if you're seeing my face right now, that means you watched to the end of the video, and I'll always be grateful for that. Retention helps in this crazy YouTube game, and so does becoming a patron. If you head on down to the description, you can find a link to my Patreon page. Recently just redid all the tiers, a lot of cool stuff offering up there, exclusive commentaries, exclusive polls, behind the scenes concept art for Capes and Quest. That's the brand new D&D show I've started soon. Never been a better time to become a patron. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month and help the channel grow and, help me continue to deliver content like what you just saw. So I want to thank you all, and I will see you again next time. Bye-bye.